AFR Talk. Calls I want to take in this half hour have to do with a botched execution in, I think it was Oklahoma. The execution of a murderer by the name of Clayton Lockett, who, by the way, admitted to committing the murder. He confessed that he did it. And as you are aware, this thing was horribly botched. I don't have the story right in front of me. Let me see if I can find it. This is Washington Post. An Oklahoma inmate who was supposed to be executed Tuesday instead died of a heart attack after the execution was botched, state officials said. Clayton Lockett's execution Tuesday night was halted after about 20 minutes due to an issue with a vein, the Associated Press reported. Not long after Lockett was deemed unconscious from the first of the three drugs, he began writhing on the gurney, according to the Associated Press. He was declared dead 43 minutes after the execution began. So this naturally has created this huge storm of controversy about the death penalty. Now, I want to mention one thing, and I'm going to get your reactions to this because I'm going to describe what this guy did. In fact, in the next few minutes, if you got young ears within earshot, you might want to shift gears. Just be aware that this would be relatively intense information, but it's important to really get the whole picture of what's going on here. This is a terrible thing. This guy's writhing in agony. The execution, the drug injection doesn't work. He's only administered one of the three drugs. He goes unconscious. Then he begins writhing uncontrollably on the gurney. They can't find a vein to get the other drugs into him. And finally, he dies, not of the lethal injection, but he dies of a heart attack. Now, first thing I want to point out is that capital punishment is endorsed in the Bible. You go all the way back to Genesis 9 after the flood. And remember what you have leading up to the flood. This is a little bit of an excursus, but it's important. Prior to the flood, not a lot of people understand this or know this, but prior to the flood, you had no capital punishment. Remember, Cain was saying to God, look, if they find me, they're going to kill me. I will be put to death for having murdered my brother. And God says to him, look, I'm not going to let that happen. Cain says, I will be God says, you're cursed from the ground. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. So you're going to have to leave town. You're basically going to live the rest of your life in exile from civilization. Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. You have driven me away today from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. In other words, capital punishment. I'll be put to death for murdering my brother. The Lord said to him, not so. No capital punishment. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest anyone who found him should attack him. And then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. So God prohibited capital punishment prior to the flood. Now, why is that important? Because we see the whole point of the first 6 chapters of Genesis is for us to have a record of what happens to a culture where you don't have capital punishment for heinous crimes, where it's prohibited, where it is forbidden. God himself was the one that prohibited the use of capital punishment prior to the flood. Not going to happen. Anybody that executes capital punishment on Cain, going to have to deal with me, and I will avenge that act sevenfold. So you had a world now, which would be a dream world as far as liberals are concerned, an absolute dream world where there's no capital punishment. Nobody is put to death for even heinous crimes against humanity. So here's an opportunity for us to see how that works. How does it work when you have a culture, an entire society, an entire culture that lives without the restraint of the law, that lives without justice, that lives without the possibility of capital punishment? Things went obviously from bad to worse. People taking vengeance and justice into their own hands. This is what a guy by the name of Lamech said to his wife. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. So in other words, everybody was taking justice into their own hands. You had chaos. You had vigilante justice because there was no government there, no agency of the state with God's authority to execute capital punishment. So where do things get? Genesis 6:5, Yahweh saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. And he was forced to blot out man whom he had created from the face of the earth. Like you got to throw out a carton of cottage cheese that sits in a broken down refrigerator all summer. There's nothing to save there, nothing you can do but pitch it out. So then after the flood, then God, chapter 9, says to Noah, whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. So God authorizes the use of capital punishment in Genesis 9. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. So God there delegates his authority basically to civil government to use capital punishment, particularly in cases of homicide, in cases of murder. Now, getting back to this Clayton Lockett guy, and I want to get your reactions to this. Your reaction to the fact that this execution was botched. The state admits they botched it. He writhes around on this gurney, and then finally dies of a heart attack and not lethal injection. I was going to mention that I still think that the best way to do it is firing squad. I mean, the last criminal to be executed by firing squad was Gary Gilmore, Utah, 1977. But here's the deal about firing squad. That the way that it works is that you are not alive long enough to feel any pain. In other words, when you're executed by firing squad, you are dead before your nervous system can even register the pain or transmit it to your brain. So it's the most humane way if you're going to execute people, and it does become a tragic necessity. And God says, I've instituted it to bring order and stability and justice to society. Somebody deprives another citizen of the unalienable right to life. I'm going to give my authority to the state so that they can do something about it. So this is a 43-minute of agony for this guy before he dies. This is horrible, terrible. Again, I'm recommending firing squad is the most humane way to do this. But I want you to listen for a minute, and this is where you want to protect tender ears. Listen to a minute about the crime for which this guy was sentenced. Clayton Lockett was sentenced to death following the shocking murder of Stephanie Neiman, who was 19 years old at the time. She was kidnapped, shot twice, and buried alive in 1999, a month after she graduated from high school. Lockett was involved in a botched raid on a house with two other men belonging to Bobby Bornt when Miss Neiman and another 19-year-old woman walked in. So they catch him in the middle of burglarizing this house. Reports from the time said that Mr. Bornt owed Lockett money and that he was tied up and beaten during the ordeal. So Bornt's in there. They got him tied up. They're beating him up, trying to get money out of him when Miss Neiman and her friend walk in the house. Miss Neiman's friend was dragged into the house and hit in the face with a shotgun. Under duress, the friend then called Miss Neiman into the home, and she was also hit in the face with a gun. Her friend was raped by all three men before they were taken to a rural part of Kay County, Oklahoma. Lockett told them he was going to kill them all, but shot Miss Neiman twice when she refused to give her keys and pickup's alarm code. When she was shot dead, she was stood in a shallow grave that had been dug by one of Lockett's accomplices, Sean Mathis. He told Lockett that Miss Neiman was still alive. He could see her breathing, struggling for life, but Lockett ordered Mathis to bury her. According to Tulsa World, Bornt wrote a letter that said, Clayton being put to death by lethal injection is almost too easy of a way to die after what he did to us. He will just be strapped to the table. He will go to sleep and his heart will stop beating. Her parents wrote an impact statement to jurors in which they praised her for not backing down against Lockett. Right is right and wrong is wrong. Maybe that's what Clayton was so scared of, because Stephanie did stand up for her rights. She did not blink an eye at him. We raised her to work hard for what she got. And Lockett was convicted of murder, rape, kidnapping, assault and battery, burglary, and robbery, and burying his victim alive. And so I want to get your reaction to all of this. Is your sympathy with those that are complaining about capital punishment? You know, my view of this is, hey, his victim suffered a whole lot more than he did. Well, let's grab a phone before the break. Let us go to Adam, Farmington, Missouri. Adam, welcome. What's on your mind?
Thanks, brother, for having me on the show. Just a couple things. One, I actually read that story first thing this morning, and it's extremely horrible to hear about the way that happened. But like you said, the family, well, the people who were murdered suffered worse. They suffered agonizing pain and fear too, being buried alive. So I mean, it was, if the people out there haven't read the story, it was tragic. But my main comment is, you had commented on the firing squad being the most humane way, and I wanted to give some food for thought for that, and just for you and for anybody else out there. There's a representative in Missouri that here recently had tried to push a bill to bring back the firing squad. And my main concern with that was that the firing squad shooters were going to be law enforcement officers. Well, I'm a minister, but I was in law enforcement for several years, and as an officer, I did not get into that to execute people. And, you know, while we sit back and say that may be the most humane way, and it may be for the person being killed, but I fear that brings such undue trauma to the people pulling the trigger that it would be very regretful. I mean, if they called you today and said, hey, we're going to execute someone, would you come pull the trigger? I mean, that'd be very tough. And I'll leave it at that, let you answer off there.
Okay, Adam, listen, thank you for that call. I appreciate that. Yeah, and, you know, this isn't to say that everybody should be forced to participate in a firing squad. I'm not saying anybody ought to be ordered to do that. Anybody should be compelled to do that. If they've got a conscientious objection to it, I say that's fine. Let's not make somebody participate in a firing squad if they don't want to, if they've got reasons against it. But I think with a guy like this, you're not going to have any trouble finding volunteers to put this guy and administer justice on behalf of the 19-year-old girl. Back in 2.
When Tim Wilder